Mercedes did not just find speed in Spain. They may have found something far more dangerous, a way to be legal in one moment and untouchable in the next. And now the Federación Internacional de el Automóvil has reached the point every dominant team fears, because the question is no longer whether Mercedes were fast. The question is why they were fast, why their advantage appeared when it mattered most, and why rival teams believe the answer was hiding in plain sight. Before the full story makes sense, there is one detail everyone keeps missing, and it connects the engine, the front wing, Barcelona, Russell, Antonelli, and the sudden feeling that Mercedes are not as safe as they look. Subscribe to the channel. At first, the Spanish Grand Prix looked like another Mercedes statement. Another weekend where the silver car seemed to have an answer before anyone else had even understood the question. The lap time was there. The confidence was there. The balance looked sharp. And from the outside, it would have been easy to say the same thing people always say when Mercedes dominate. They built a better car. But that explanation is too clean. Because inside Formula 1, when one team suddenly looks calm while everyone else looks confused, people do not just admire it. They investigate it. They pull apart every sector time, every speed trace, every strange movement of the car, every moment where the advantage appears and disappears. They ask where the time is really coming from. Not where the team says it is coming from, but where the stopwatch says it is hiding. And that is where Mercedes have walked into trouble. Not because they won. Not because they were quick. But because their speed in Barcelona landed at the exact moment when the Federación Internacional de el Automóvil was already watching two separate technical storms around the team. One around the power unit. One around the active front wing. Two different areas of the car, both capable of changing everything, and both arriving at the worst possible time. That sounds like coincidence. It may not be. To understand why this matters, imagine a classroom where every student takes the same test. One student finishes early, gets every answer right, and never looks nervous. Maybe that student studied harder. Maybe they are simply better. But then someone notices something strange. The student did not break any rule while the teacher was watching. The trick, if there was one, happened between the moments the teacher chose to check. That is the suspicion around Mercedes. The issue is not just whether the car passed inspection. The issue is when it passed, how it passed, and whether the car behaved the same way during the race as it did when the officials measured it. And that is where Barcelona becomes more than a Grand Prix. It becomes a test. Mercedes entered the season as the team everyone feared. The new Formula 1 regulations had changed the sport again. The power units were different. The aerodynamics were different. The cars were smarter, more complex, and more dependent on systems that had to work together perfectly. In that kind of reset, dominance does not usually come from one magic part. It comes from understanding the gray areas before anyone else does. And Mercedes seemed to understand them very quickly. But here is the first clue. Before the season had even settled, rival manufacturers were already uncomfortable. Ferrari, Audi, and Honda raised concerns over the way Mercedes, and also Red Bull, might have interpreted the new engine rules. The controversy centered on compression ratio, which is a way of describing how tightly the engine squeezes the air and fuel before it ignites. In simple terms, more squeeze can mean more power, but the rules place a limit on how much is allowed. The limit was 16-1. That sounds simple. It was not. Because the regulation measured that limit at ambient temperature. In plain English, that means the engine could be checked when it was not at full racing heat. But an engine is not doing its real job when it is sitting politely in a cold inspection. It does its real job when it is hot, angry, vibrating, and being pushed to the edge down a straight. And according to the allegations in the source material, rivals believed Mercedes may have found a way to use advanced materials that changed shape slightly with heat. Not dramatically. Not in some cartoonish way. Just enough. Enough that an engine could appear legal when measured cold, then behave differently when it reached operating temperature. Think of a tight jar lid. When it is cold, it barely moves. Warm it up, and suddenly it changes just enough to open. The object looks the same. The difference is hidden in the condition. That is what made the accusation so explosive. The claim was not that Mercedes had failed a normal check. The claim was that the check itself might not have been asking the right question. And if that advantage was real, rival estimates suggested it could be worth 0.3 to 0.4 of a second per lap. In Formula 1, that is not a small gap. That is the difference between pressure and control. Between fighting for position and choosing your strategy from the front. Between a driver looking heroic and a car quietly giving them a weapon nobody else has. But this was only the first layer. Because while the engine story was already burning behind the scenes, another suspicion began to grow around the front of the Mercedes car. The active front wing. This is where the story becomes more dangerous for Mercedes, because an engine advantage can be hidden deep inside the car. A front wing is visible. It is right there. Every camera can see it. Every rival engineer can study it. Every movement matters. The new rules allowed active aerodynamics. That means parts of the car could move between fixed positions under controlled conditions. The idea was to make the cars work in different phases of the lap, while still keeping the system regulated. The front wing had to transition between its two fixed positions within 400 milliseconds. Less than half a second. A blink. But reports cited in the source material alleged that the Mercedes front wing may have been doing something more subtle. It was said to partially close within the legal window, satisfying the sensors, before continuing to move toward its final position over a longer period, closer to 800 milliseconds. Now, that might sound tiny. It is not. In Formula 1, tiny is where championships live. If a wing changes too quickly, too slowly, or at the wrong moment, it can change how the car bites into the track. It can change balance. It can change tire life. It can change how confident a driver feels on corner entry. It can make the front of the car feel alive when another car feels lazy. And when that happens at a circuit like Barcelona, the effect can be enormous. Barcelona punishes imbalance. It exposes weakness. It tells you if a car is truly planted or only pretending. A car that is unstable through the long corners will eat its tires. A car that cannot trust its front end will force the driver to wait. And waiting, even for a fraction of a second, is death by 1,000 cuts. So when Mercedes looked fast in Spain, rivals were not just looking at the lap time. They were asking whether the speed came from something they could see, something they could prove, or something the rulebook had not fully caught yet. And the timing could not have been worse. Because Barcelona arrived around the regulatory inflection point. The deadline when the Federación Internacional de Automobiles revised engine measurement approach began to matter. From the 1st of June, according to the source material, compression ratios would be measured not only at ambient temperature, but also at 130 degrees Celsius operating temperature. That detail changes the entire story. Because if Mercedes had been gaining from the difference between cold inspection and hot racing condition, Barcelona was the moment that advantage could begin to disappear. The moment the hidden room in the rulebook started to close. The moment rivals could finally compare Mercedes before and after the door was shut. And Toto Wolff reportedly acknowledged that Barcelona would reveal where Mercedes really stood relative to its rivals. That is not a throwaway line. That is a warning. Because when a team principal says a race will reveal where the team stands, he is not only talking about pace. He is talking about truth. He is talking about whether the advantage survives when the rules tighten. Whether the car remains dominant when the inspection changes. Whether the world sees engineering brilliance or the end of a loophole. But the technical story is only half the danger. The other half is inside the Mercedes garage. Because while the Federación Internacional de Automóvil was looking at the car, the world was watching the drivers, and what was happening there was almost as explosive. Mercedes did not just have a fast car. They had a problem with two faces. George Russell, the established driver. The man expected to lead. The one who had waited for his era, survived the pressure of sharing a team with Lewis Hamilton, and entered this new phase believing the team could finally be built around him. And Kimi Antonelli, the teenager. The prodigy. The driver elevated into the most dangerous seat in Formula 1, not to learn quietly in the background, but to replace a legend and immediately fight at the front. At the start, Russell looked like the obvious leader. He won in Australia. The hierarchy seemed intact. Experience on one side. Youth on the other. Mercedes could tell themselves everything was under control. Then China happened. Antonelli won. Then Japan. Antonelli won again. Suddenly, the story was not about a rookie learning. It was about a rookie taking confidence, taking momentum, taking space in the team that Russell believed he had already earned. And as the season moved forward, the gap became harder to explain away. Russell had setbacks, qualifying problems, setup gambles, safety car timing, reliability pain. The kind of moments that drivers call bad luck because it is easier than saying the car, the team, and the championship are slipping away from them at the same time. After Suzuka, Russell said he was not feeling too lucky. That sentence matters because it sounds calm, but it carries frustration underneath. Drivers do not like to talk about luck because luck is the one thing they cannot control. And when a Formula 1 driver starts feeling like events are happening to him, rather than because of him, the mental battle changes. But it got worse. Canada turned the tension into something visible. Russell won the sprint race. He took pole position. For a moment, it looked like the comeback had arrived. He had the front of the grid. He had the speed. He had the chance to remind Mercedes who he was. Then the main race broke him. A power unit failure ended his race from the lead, while Antonelli went on to win again. The championship gap exploded. And the pain was not only mechanical. It was personal. Because every time Russell lost ground through a problem, Antonelli was there to collect the reward. That is when a team starts becoming dangerous to itself. Not because the drivers hate each other. Not because the engineers lose ability. But because every garage has an invisible balance. A line between healthy competition and emotional damage. When both drivers believe the same car should be theirs, every briefing becomes loaded. Every setup direction becomes political. Every strategy call feels like evidence. And according to the source material, there had already been contact in the sprint race battle. David Croft advised Mercedes management to stay away from the fight, but even that advice reveals the problem. When a team is told not to interfere, it usually means the situation is already fragile. And Toto Wolff, a man who has lived through some of the most intense teammate rivalries in modern Formula One, hinted that team orders could become reality if results were compromised. That is the kind of sentence a team principal does not want to say too early. Because the moment team orders enter the room, the drivers hear different things. One hears protection. The other hears control. And both hear danger. Then came Monaco. If Canada was cruel, Monaco was revealing. Russell arrived needing a reset. Monaco is supposed to be a driver's circuit. A place where courage, precision, and confidence can cover weaknesses. A place where the stopwatch can feel personal. But Russell had no answer to Antonelli's qualifying pace. His race collapsed through a drive-through penalty, a costly pit stop problem, and a finish outside the points. Antonelli won comfortably. And Russell's words afterward were not the usual media polish. He said he was flat. Beyond frustration. Struggling to comprehend what was going on. That is not just disappointment. That is a driver openly admitting that the machine beneath him no longer feels like an extension of himself. He said nothing was clicking. He said his driving style was not working with the car. He said he needed either to adjust or push for development changes that helped him drive more naturally. Now connect that to Barcelona. If the Mercedes car had a hidden advantage through the engine, or a clever behavior through the wing, that advantage may not help both drivers equally. Some cars reward a certain style. Some cars like a driver who turns in aggressively. Some prefer patience. Some protect the rear. Some demand total trust in the front. Antonelli, somehow, seemed to have that trust. Russell did not. And that creates a question Mercedes cannot easily escape. Was the W17 simply a brilliant car that Antonelli understood better, or was it a highly specific machine built around a technical window so narrow that only one driver could truly exploit it? That is where the Spanish Grand Prix becomes a mirror. Not just for Mercedes against Ferrari. Not just for Mercedes against the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile. But for Mercedes against itself. Because if the car remains dominant after the tighter checks, Mercedes can say the rumors were noise. They can say the rivals panicked. They can say the engineering was legal, clever, and misunderstood. But if the advantage shrinks, the paddock will not forget. Formula One never forgets timing. A car is quick before a rule clarification, then less quick after it. A system works before scrutiny, then disappears after a technical directive. A team insists everything is normal, then suddenly changes behavior. Even when no penalty arrives, the suspicion can become part of the story forever. And Mercedes know this better than anyone. They have been the team everybody chased. They have lived through years where rivals studied them like a puzzle. They understand that dominance attracts jealousy, but also that jealousy sometimes finds real smoke. The front wing investigation adds pressure because it touches a different kind of trust. A power unit argument is complex. Most fans cannot see compression ratio. They cannot see thermal expansion inside the engine. They have to trust the experts. But a wing that moves in two phases, if proven, feels easier to understand. The idea is simple. The car does enough to pass the first check, then keeps gaining after the check thinks the job is finished. It is like a door that appears closed when the teacher looks, then quietly keeps sliding into a better position after the teacher turns away. That is why the accusation hurts. It makes people question the spirit of the rule, not only the letter. And in Formula One, the spirit of the rule is where arguments become wars. Because every great team bends the rules. That is the sport. The fastest cars are not built by people who only ask what is allowed. They are built by people who ask what is not forbidden yet. The line between genius and wrongdoing is often not a wall. It is a shadow. And the best engineers spend their lives standing right at the edge of it.